Hey everyone, welcome to my channel to all things football and all things career mode. Today I'll be showing you my take on how to make the FIFA Career Mode experience as realistic as possible. I'll be giving you guys an actual rule set I've created, which makes specific changes to how things like scouting, transfers, contracts, and the youth academy work in the game. The goal is for everything to feel a little more in-depth, more challenging, and overall just more representative of how things actually function in the world of football. This is how I play all my career modes, including the ones I uploaded on my channel, and it's a lot of fun. I really hope you guys enjoy and find this useful. First, a quick look at some settings. I usually start by disabling the first transfer window. It's optional in my setup, but I think it makes a lot of sense. When FIFA releases, updated squads will already include players bought in the summer, so make do with what you have in the first season. It'll be a tad harder and will set things off to a realistic start. In terms of difficulty, ideally pick something that will give you a challenge. Winning football games shouldn't be easy. I know even Legendary or Ultimate is still too easy for some of you, and the gameplay might also not feel as authentic as it perhaps could be. FIFA, let's face it, just isn't the best football simulator. And if that's the situation you find yourself in, look at adjusting some sliders. I haven't tried playing with any advanced ones myself, but there's a great source of realistic career mode sliders on Operation Sports Forum. These are community sliders that are created, continuously worked on, and updated for every FIFA that releases, so definitely be sure to check that out. I will leave a link in the description below. In my rule set, I stick to raising injury frequency to 75 and lowering severity to 40. Now these numbers aren't set in stone, feel free to adjust them, but the idea is simply to incorporate more injury struggles during the season, to simulate the many knocks teams get throughout the season, and force you to have to rotate the squad. This change will add an element of depth, I think, perhaps not game-changing, but a nice dash of realism. Another thing I'm really big on is playing with authentic league regulations. Every FA has their own rules that govern their leagues, and if you truly want to play a realistic career mode, then follow them as best you can. For example, in the Premier League, some players need work permits, others must be homegrown to satisfy a minimum quota of homegrown talent. In La Liga, all players must have release clauses in their contracts. So when starting a career, you'd go in and update all the contracts, for example. All these small details will add a lot of authenticity. The bottom line is, do a quick Google search and play by the official rules as much as you can. Before I get to the rest of the changes, I just want to mention that the screenshots you see are from the written version of my rule set, which you can find under a Google Drive link in the description below. Going forward, I will also explain all my rules with the help of examples of myself playing the Everton career mode. I have this entire series up on my channel, so if you're interested and haven't had the chance yet, go check that out. Okay, we kick off the rule changes by looking at how to run your scouting department. Right off the bat, the first thing to note is that you can only sign players who you found using the global transfer network. They must also be shortlisted and have a full scouting report. Recruitment in football is a critical part of success. Clubs don't buy players on a whim. There's a ton of work that goes into both scouting the market for players and analyzing their strengths, weaknesses, and tendencies. To reflect this in FIFA, you'll now have to do a better job at both identifying and finding the players you want to sign using only the instructions to search for them. In addition, there is now a cap on the number of scouts a club can employ, which is dependent on your club's star rating. It's quite simple. Every club can have 3 scouts. If you are a 2.5 star club, you can have 4 scouts. A 3.5 star club can have 5, and a 4.5 star club can have all 6 scouts. Smaller clubs just naturally have less staff contracted to the club, so they will in turn have fewer scouting opportunities. Usually, when you start a career mode, you will have the correct number of scouts, but sometimes you will get more or less, in which case hire or fire as needed. As Everton, I only had 5 scouts at the beginning of the game, but as a 4.5 star club, I can employ a 6th if I choose. Another cap regarding the staff is that you cannot hire scouts which are higher rated than your club, with the caveat that if they were originally at the club, they can stay whatever their star rating. The best clubs simply, more often than not, also employ some of the best people in the business. As Everton is a 4.5 star club, I wouldn't be able to sign this Romanian 5-star scout, for example, but I could sign this English 4-star scout. There are also limitations on where scouts must or can search. One scout must always scout your parent country. It makes logical sense that you would have a deep knowledge of the league you're actually playing in. As Everton, I scouted England. In most leagues, you often also see a large number of players from neighboring countries. Austrian and Czech players in the Bundesliga, Swiss and Belgian players in Ligue 1, so a second scout must always travel to a country geographically close to the parent country. When it comes to the wording of geographically close, just use your judgment here. Perhaps don't pick Turkey or Italy if you're an English club. As Everton, I scouted Scotland, for example. If you have a fourth scout, he can search anywhere in your continent or region, depending on where you started your career mode, of course. Everton would scout anywhere in Europe. Scouts 5 and 6 are free to scout globally anywhere they wish. Another important part of scouting is researching your opposition. That's why one scout must always be unassigned to a location and will only be in charge of scouting players from the teams you'll be facing. A good way to do this is when you start your career mode, start scouting the teams you'll be playing immediately and sequentially according to the fixture list. Another suggestion is to go into the team sheets and look at who the opponent starts on paper and get reports on those players first. Once you've scouted the starters for all the teams, you can then move on to subs and reserves as the season progresses. The idea here is to know who you'll be facing, identify threats in the opponent's team as well as weaknesses that can be exploited. Try to avoid mindlessly playing game after game. Look at the players you scouted, the opponent's formation and tactics, and then do what managers do. Set up your team taking into account all this information you have and make small tactical adjustments or big tactical adjustments. As Everton, I often played Ben Godfrey as a right back in my first season if the opposition had a particularly fast left winger. That's because Seamus Coleman didn't have the pace anymore to effectively defend fast players. I also switched my system often from a 4-4-2 to a 4-3-3, depending on the opponent's formation and tactics, whether I was playing home or away. Varying this up will keep it both realistic and interesting. And the last thing about scouting is more of a tip or guideline. Make sure you slowly build up a long shortlist of players for every position, so that if you are forced to sell a player, and this is a mechanic in my rules, then you can go straight to your shortlist and just pick up a replacement. Start to also think about your transfers in a realistic way. As Everton, don't aim for top European talent or the highest rated players in similarly rated teams. Aim to pick up exceptional players from lower rated clubs like Max Aarons and Todd Cantwell from Norwich, notable players from the Championship like David Brooks from Bournemouth, perhaps out of favour or reserve players from bigger clubs like Jesse Lingard from Man United. And having said all this, it leads me into the biggest thing you can do by far to make career mode truly realistic. Overhaul the transfer market. I'll divide this into two sections. First, let's take a look at selling players. It's very uncommon to have no outgoing transfers as a club or to have players stay in the same team for their entire careers. Most players develop and outgrow their current club, effectively using it as a stepping stone in their career. Whilst it's true that clubs aren't obligated to accept offers for their players, a lot of the times, if the valuation is met, they'll let a player go. We're gonna make this reality mandatory in our career mode. So, if a sufficiently big club comes in for one of your players, you may be forced to sell. Now, you won't ever have to sell to a rival, so Everton doesn't have to sell to Liverpool, and you won't ever have to sell a player in the first year that you sign them. But, in a player's second year at the club, if another club 5 ratings or higher bids for him, you have to sell. In a player's third year, the club only needs to be 3 ratings higher now. Rating is a simple calculation. Take a team's overall, which you can easily find and calculate by searching under team sheets. I'll give you an example here. Real Madrid offered for one of my players. They have 83 attack, 85 midfield, and 83 defense. They play a 4-3-3. So 4 defenders times 83, which they have in defense. They play 3 midfielders times 85 they have in midfield, and 3 attackers times the 83 they have in attack. You add all those numbers and simply divide by the 10 players to get an average overall of the team. In this case, 83.6, rounded up to 84. Now that you know the overall, you can start adding different modifiers to it. First, look at league reputation. I made a tier list of leagues based on UEFA coefficients. Just check it and see where both clubs are in relation to one another. In the Everton example, both teams play in a tier 1 league, La Liga and Premier League, so this doesn't affect the ratings. Then you just continue down the list. If they play Champions League, add 1. Next, if a team has 4 or more prestige than your club, add 1. Prestige is just a number taken from the SoFIFA website that each team has. If the transfer is international, like in this example, then you use international prestige. If it's domestic, you would use the domestic value. In Real Madrid's case, they have 10 international prestige, Everton only has 5, so add 1 to Real Madrid's rating. The last modifier is only for select teams who have both a 10 international and domestic prestige. Because these are the most renowned clubs in the world, they get an extra 1 added to their rating. Real Madrid is obviously one of them, so at the end of the day, Real Madrid's team overall is 84, but their rating in relation to Everton is 87. Everton's rating was calculated at 80. Since it's 7 higher, I would have to sell my player to Real Madrid even if they came in for him in the second year of his contract. If the rating had been 84, for example, then I wouldn't have to. Now we've determined you have to sell this player, but that's only true if they can match your valuation. The valuation is also determined from a base player value plus some modifiers. There are certain things that increase or decrease the value of a player in real life. His contract status, his age, potential for growth, his current form. Just go through it like a checklist here. In my career mode, Real Madrid came in for Michael Keane. A side note, obviously, that sounds unrealistic. I don't think they would ever do that, but that's not in our control. If they ever did, Keane would jump at the chance. So you look at his value, it's 25.5 million. Then you go through the modifiers like a checklist and add to his value accordingly. He's 29 years old, so you add 15%. The younger you are, the more this is. His morale was good, so you add 10%. And he's an important player, so add another 10%. Together that's 35% on top of his value, which gives you 35 million. So what you do is you keep asking Real Madrid for this price in negotiations, and if they accept, sell him. Simple. All this information, like form and morale, you can find in the squad hub in the game. The only thing you have to look for is a player's potential, which you can find on SoFIFA. I'll give another quick example here. It also happened in my career mode. Man City came in for Allen. Their team overall was 86. You add +1 because they're in the Champions League, +1 for prestige because they are at least 4 prestige higher than me, and +1 for having that perfect 10 and 10 international and domestic prestige, which gave them a rating of 89, which means I obviously have to sell. Allen was worth 29.5 million. He was a crucial player, so you add 20%, and his form and morale were both good, so you add 10% each. That's a total of 40% extra value, which gives you 42 million, and Man City accepted the offer, so goodbye, Allen. And that's my mechanic when it comes to being forced to sell players. Don't worry, you'll never have to sell all your best players at once. There's a rule for this. You only ever have to sell 2 crucial or important players in a summer transfer window, only 1 in a winter transfer window, and you only have to sell 1 player on deadline day, only in the summer. That doesn't apply to the winter transfer window. The last really important thing to remember, if an offer from a bigger club comes in for one of your players, even if the valuation isn't met and you don't end up selling that player, they'll never sign a new contract with you from then on. So be prepared to sell them at some point or let them go on a free. This player basically realizes he's outgrown the club and he wants to leave. That's basically the reasoning behind that. All these rules will force you to sell players, as that is the harsh reality of football. Players move on to different clubs, they make career moves, and as a manager, if you want to be successful, you have to learn how to rebuild squads on the fly, like Ferguson did so well many times at United. The other half of the equation is buying players. How do you know if a transfer is realistic? I've often asked myself this question, as I'm sure you guys have, because it's one of the biggest things that either makes or breaks a realistic career mode. And so I've come up with a system so that you don't have to guess. It's almost like a questionnaire that determines yes or no. Is this transfer realistic? Is it going to go through? If the total value is a non-negative one, so 0 or above, it means the transfer is realistic and it'll go through. I wanted to sign Gakpo for my Everton career mode, and I'll go through this as an example. First, I looked at the player overall. Is this player transferring to a club at his level? Gakpo is 79 rated, Everton's team overall is 80, so +1. Next up, how much potential growth does this player have? Gakpo had the potential to be 85. This you can take from the SoFIFA website. That's 5 higher than Everton's 80. Each potential is worth half a point, so -2.5. Then you look at the opposing teams overall. Is this player transferring to a better club? PSV is 76 overall, Everton is 80, so +4. The next values, international and domestic prestige, are taken from the SoFIFA website, and you just compare the two. Is this player transferring to a club with more international prestige? PSV has 5, and Everton has 5 as well, so nothing changes. For domestic prestige, PSV has 9 and Everton has 6, so that's a difference of 3. Since it's not a domestic transfer, each point is only worth half, so minus 1.5. Next up is league reputation. Is this player transferring to a better league? You again look at my tier list that I created, and PSV is 4 tiers lower, so yes, plus 4. Next up is European location desire. Is this player transferring to Europe? That's important for a lot of players. Both teams are in Europe, so you skip this. Next up is European competitions. Is the player transferring to a club playing in international competitions? PSV has Champions League, which is worth 3, and Everton aren't in any competitions, so minus 3. Next up is the past year prime bonus. Is the player past his prime, so 30 years or older? Nope. Gakpo is only 22 years old. If he was older than 30, you would get a bonus of plus 1 for every year that he's older than 30. Next up is the compatriot bonus. Will he play alongside his compatriots? There are no Dutch players on the Everton squad, so you skip this. If there was, for every 3 players, he would get plus 1, up to a maximum of 3. Next up is the old club bonus. Is he coming back to a familiar club? No, he's never played in Everton before. If he was, he would get plus 2. Next up is the loyalty deterrent. Is this player leaving a long-time employer? Gakpo has been at PSV since 2016, so that's 5 years. This doesn't apply to him. It's minus 1 for every year at a club starting in year 6. Next up is the home bonus. Is the player coming back to his homeland? This is only a positive modifier, but Gakpo is not coming back to Netherlands, he's leaving Netherlands. The next criteria is one where you can use money to buy a few extra points if you need to get over the top. You give a player higher wages, double his signing bonus, and or give him a release clause in his contract, and you get up to 3 points. This will be especially useful in leagues which have a lot of money, and it also reflects their higher purchasing power. The last thing on the list is when a player is transfer listed. You get a bonus of plus 2, and in addition, you can ignore any negative values when calculating a team's overall, prestige, and loyalty. The end result is of course a number which, if negative, indicates the transfer isn't realistic. And if it's a positive number, or at least 0, it means it's feasible. This is essentially how you'll know if you can buy this player or not. In the case of Cody Gakpo, it's plus 2, so I ended up getting him for my Everton career mode. Now, I'll give you some examples of some unrealistic transfers in the case of Everton. Let's say you wanted to get Milinkovic-Savic. He plays in a worse league, yes, and you can try to lure him with money, but he's already such a good player, 85 rated. He plays for a similar club in terms of overall and stature, but if he was to move from his longtime employer, Lazio, it would likely have to be a really good club. If you run the numbers, even with a full financial package that gives you plus 3, the total comes out to minus 4, and it's largely due to the fact that Milinkovic-Savic is an 85 rated player and Everton is only 80 rated. If he moves from Lazio, it really would realistically be to a bigger club than Everton. And if you look at it the other way, it would be hard for Everton to sign an 85 rated player in real life. They have to develop players into that kind of quality. They can't just go out and buy them. Another example is Jude Bellingham. Again, even with a full financial package, the total would be minus 3. Even though you have a lot to offer Bellingham, he's coming back home to England, he's playing in a better league, you might offer him more money. He's one of the top talents in the world. His potential could land him in a top club. He would also be giving up Champions League, so it's unlikely he would decide to move to Everton. Keep in mind these values change, and as your team gets better, as they play in European competitions, it'll be easier and easier to land bigger players. The next aspect of career mode that I aim to make more realistic is player contracts. The first thing I added is mandatory signing or loyalty bonuses. This is a very common thing to find in player contracts in real life. If you're signing a new contract or extension, you must pay a player a flat signing on fee relative to his wages and the length of the contract or extension you're offering him. Players with a bigger role in the team get more money. Crucial players get 4 weeks worth of wages for every year of contract, whereas, for example, a sporadic player would only get 1 week's worth of wages. It's a simple calculation. If you're paying a player 100K a week and sign him to a 4-year contract as a crucial player, he will get 4 weeks worth of wages because he's a crucial player, so 400K, for each of the 4 years of his contract, so a total of 1.2 million. In my career mode, for example, I re-signed Doucouré to a 1-year extension at 90K. He was an important player, so I had to pay him 3 times his weekly wage for that 1-year extension, so a total of 270K. There is also a general rule when signing contracts. Players will not accept less money unless in very specific circumstances. And if you think about it, a lot of the times players are simply unwilling to transfer because they are making so much money at their current club and they know they won't get that anywhere else. So they basically stay and collect the paycheck. In my rules, if a player got relegated last season, he's eligible for a 25% wage reduction. You can think of this as a wage cut clause in his contract upon getting relegated. A transfer listed player might recognize he needs more playing time and he's willing to sacrifice a little bit, 20% of his wages, in return for getting game time. Older players may realize their stock isn't that high and accept a slightly lower wage of minus 10%. The values are all on the screen, and like I said before, with all these details, obviously you can't remember it all, but you can always refer to either this video or more efficiently my PDF. It's in the link in the description below. To accommodate players who have really high wages in certain countries, like China, those who are transferring into Europe will accept a reduction. In this one case, you can give them a wage equal to that of your highest earner. This really is for players coming back from China, for example, so you can still play with them. With all these contract offers, though, the bottom line is a player still has to accept less wages in the game, and they're sometimes inclined to do that, but other times they will not. The other part to contracts is that when a player is signed on a pre-contract or as a free agent, you have to pay them a little bit more money. The formula here is simple. You increase the player's wages by 25% on top of what you would normally offer him. That obviously also increases his signing bonus. And in addition to all of this, he gets a nice big fat signing boost. That simulates the buckets of money players actually get when they're going to a club for free. This is because since clubs don't have to pay transfer fees, more money then lands in a player's or agent's pockets. Now, this rule also stops you from abusing the pre-contract market. It will be profitable still, but it will also eat into your finances. The boost value that you give is simply 50 times the weekly wage, so nearly 1 year's worth of contract on top of the usual money received in a contract, the wages and the signing on. A player at 100K wages would thus make 125K instead. His regular signing bonus on a 4-year contract would increase to 1.5 million instead of 1.2 million. And then on top of that, he would receive an extra 6.25 million. But it's worth it if normally that player would cost you 40 million. The aim here is just to make the pre-contracts more realistic. These players do get more money and pretty hefty signing on fees. And it also obviously reduces the cheese factor that you can just get free players and create your squad that way. One thing to note is that overall, you want to have a consistent wage structure at your club if possible. So find the value you want to play your crucial players, your important ones. Obviously, strikers get more on average than defenders, and try to stick to this value and have a consistent wage structure. Every couple of years, update everyone's wages so that they're adequately paid in relation to their skill. The last thing I want to change about career mode is the way youth academies work. Bringing in fresh new youngsters is what keeps the game going. It's a vital part of football, and the race to sign the next Messi and Ronaldo is always there. In my rules, similarly to how the GTN scouts work, there's also a cap on the number of youth scouts you can hire. Every club starts with 1. If you're a 3.5-star club, you can hire a 2nd, and if you are a 4.5-star club, you can hire a 3rd. The scout must search in specific regions. To begin with, your first scout must always be sent to your parent country, so in Everton's case, England. The second scout can search anywhere in the home continent, so in Everton's case, anywhere in Europe. I sent the guy to Wales. And the third scout is free to scout globally. I chose to send my guy to Finland. For youth scouts, there's an additional rule. They must always, without exception, scout in the country that matches their nationality. So German scouts can only scout in Germany. I did this for flavor and replayability. The staff member you originally start with may stay, just like the GTN scout can stay. However, when hiring a new staff member, you can only hire scouts that are 1 star lower than your club's rating. So a 4.5 star club can only hire 3.5 star scouts. The exceptions to this rule are if you have a high or critical youth development priority from the board. In that case, you're permitted to sign higher rated scouts up to your own star rating and up to 4.5 stars, because 5-star scouts specifically are reserved for clubs that are at least 4 stars and have a world-renowned youth academy. There's a list of 25 clubs ranked by the number of academy graduates who actually play in the top 5 leagues in Europe. So it shows who produces the best youngsters. If you are one of these top 25 clubs, you're considered to have a world-renowned youth academy. I'll leave a link to this list in the description below. It's also in my PDF rule set. Now, the second part of my changes have to do with actually acquiring new youth players. First off, you can have a maximum of 8 guys in your academy at any time, but you have to have a minimum of 4. You have to have 1 of each position, including a goalkeeper at all times. Only 3 prospects can be promoted to the senior team in any one season, unless there's a board requirement that supersedes this quota. So think carefully about which guys you want to promote to the first team. When acquiring new players for the Youth Academy, you must first wait until the very end of the scouting report to sign them. And this is supposed to simulate that you don't always land the target you want. Others may have found them first and snagged them. In addition, not every youth player just signs automatically for you. There's a chance based on the player's potential. Anyone can automatically sign 75 potential rated players. World-renowned youth academies can sign anyone whose potential is 80 or lower. Otherwise, you can sign a player whose potential is only as high as your club's overall. If the potential of a player is higher, there's only a chance to sign him. The chances go down as the potential goes up. It's 80% chance to sign if a player is between 1 and 3 potentials higher than your club, 60% if he's between 4 and 6 higher than your club, 40% to sign if he's between 7 and 9, and only 20% to sign if he's 10 or more potential points higher than your club's overall. This reflects the competition to sign the best prospects in the world. Even if you're Barcelona, you're not just guaranteed to get anyone you want. You have a very good chance, but the truly elite, the creme de la creme, may opt to go to another club like Real Madrid or PSG. A quick note, the potential of a player is always calculated by taking the average that the scout gives you, the average of the range. So in Everton's case, when signing a youth player with potential 80 to 87, the player has a potential of 84. This is 4 higher than the club, so the chance to sign this prospect is between 4 and 6, so 60%. It's simple. The entire Youth Academy portion of my rule set, however, it's been modified, and so it's not strictly followed in my Everton and Valencia series, so when you watch, just keep that in mind. And that's my entire rule set, guys. I encourage you to try it out. It really does make the game more realistic and enjoyable. I know it looks like a lot of work calculating some of these things, but once you get the hang of it, it's a piece of cake, I promise. We have to think outside the box to make FIFA Career Mode realistic because we don't have too much to work with. And guys, even if you didn't like all the different rules, you can pick and choose which ones you did. Perhaps you have some of your own ideas. Please leave comments down below. Tell me what you think about my rules. Share your own ideas. I'm always looking to change and improve my rule set. Remember to also check out all the links in the description below. You'll find the written version of this. It's much easier to find what you need in it, and if you haven't watched any of my series on my channel yet, I highly recommend you do. Please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done that already. I always greatly appreciate it. That's it for me. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you in another video. Laters!